Hi, my name is Joe LeFevre. I'm principal tuba player with the Kansas City Symphony and adjunct professor of tuba here at Washburn University. Super excited to talk to you today about the Kansas All-State material. We're talking about variations on a theme of Judas Maccabeus by Beethoven, arranged for tuba. So a couple things on how to approach this piece. There's a couple of things that we may or may not have seen before in our music, some things that are a little bit unfamiliar. So there's two excerpts. Let's take a look at the first excerpt. And we're going to look right in the first bar. We see a little, it looks like a sideway S in our music. It's called a turn. So there's a couple different ways that you can approach the turn. Basically what we're going to be doing is taking notes on either side of that concert D and tying that into that measure. So what I usually like to think of is we're going to go within the key of B flat, we're going to go a step above the D and a whole step below the D as well. So those two notes, we're going to have the half step above, which is going to be the E flat, which we're going to be using in the turn, and then the C below that D in the turn as well. So what you want to do is start by hitting the D, and then we're going to kind of just work our way through these different notes. It'll kind of sound a little bit of something like this. So notice how I'm still keeping that eighth note E flat in time, but I'm adding a couple different interesting notes for the turn on that concert D, and that is all being taken up in that dotted quarter measures. So the way I'm thinking of it on that turn is thinking of D, E flat, C, D in 16th notes basically. And then we go into the eighth note E flat at the end, and then we're jumping right back into the next measure there. A couple other things here. This is kind of a difficult passage with phrasing. We don't want to get our breath, we don't want to get in the way of the music with our breaths too much. If you can, it would be fantastic if you can make it all the way from the very beginning, this is measure 9, all the way to after the concert F in measure 12. Now that's a really big first breath, so make sure you're getting a ton of air. If you need to take another breath, you can do so after the dotted quarter F in measure 10. And you'll notice in my playing also, so I breathe twice in measure 12 after the downbeat F, eighth note, and then again I break the tie on that C dotted quarter note. And that's okay as long as we're playing it with the music. Judges are going to be looking for, basically how musically you're playing this. Accuracy matters as well, but there's nothing more important in auditions than playing music. That's what's going to be what gets you to the next level. So I really want you to key in on that and focus on a few of those things. All right, so the second excerpt is a little bit more active than the first. We've got a little bit more technique involved and a couple other fun musical things that we need to make sure we're hitting on. So a couple things, judges in this one are going to be looking for really clear and nice resonant notes throughout this, especially with the eighth notes. So we're looking right at the beginning. You can notice that all these eighth notes are staccato and also marked piano. So staccato pianos could be a little bit difficult. So one thing I like to do is practice it like this. So you'll notice the first time I slurred the entire passage, and that's just to make sure that the airstream is going and it's continuous, and we're always using that good airstream to support our sound. Then after that, all we're doing is adding a little bit of articulation and keeping the notes nice and light and bouncy, and that's how we get that nice, clear, piano articulated sound. So that's very important. So moving further, we've got a couple of these forzandos on the beats 2 and 4 of measures, 5 and 6, and you'll see it later in the piece as well. And this is kind of a moment to give it a little bit, this music seems very square and, 1-3 downbeat, kind of a feel, and then all of a sudden we get these accents on 2 and 4, and it kind of throws us off a little bit. So we want to make sure that we're hearing those, but within the context of the dynamics. So remember, these first forzandos from measures 1 through 8, we're still in that sphere of piano as a dynamic. So we want to make sure we're hitting those, but we're also staying within that kind of dynamic level, something like this. So notice how they're just a little bit more brought out than the rest of them, but nothing too crazy because, again, we're still within piano. And we'll see later in measures 13, 14, 15, that's where the sforzandos come back in a little bit more of an aggressive dynamic there. We're mezzo piano, mezzo forte. I like to push it a little bit more to mezzo forte just because we're trying to, our last dynamic marking was at measure 10 of mezzo piano. We want to make sure that we're building this phrase, so we're a little bit louder by the time we get to those sforzandos in measures 13, 14, and 15. One more thing about this passage from 10 to 16. This is probably the most musical part of this excerpt here. And I want you to notice that there's a couple things that make this phrase so musical. Specifically, I'm looking at all these accidentals in here. So this is the first time that we're really seeing some, sharps and naturals marked in our music. And usually when that happens, when we see sharps or flats or any kind of naturals within a key or within a piece, it usually means that it's not in the key signature. So that means that it's a very interesting note in, harmonically in the context of the piece. So what I want you to think of is about going to those notes and really making those notes the goal of the phrase. Listen one more time. So notice how in measures 10 and 12, the C sharp was kind of the goal of those two phrases there. And notice how I continued the motion to measure 16 as well, because that sets up the next phrase in 17 where we're much more full. One last thing here in these last few bars here, 17 to the end, make sure that we're always keeping direction through the long notes, specifically looking at the dotted half note in measure 18, and then the half note again in measure 20. We want to make sure that because it's a long note, it doesn't have as much energy as all these moving eighth notes, so we really want to keep that energy going throughout the phrase. Be sure that you don't take too much time on the rallentando too early. We see the rallentando in measure 23, and we also have molto retard in measure 24. So the key is to make sure that it all sounds organic and very smooth, because we don't want to get in the situation where at measure 23 we're already so slow that we can't slow down in measure 24. And then of course, finish with a nice resonant sounding B flat to really show your sound to the judges. So I hope that helps, explains a little bit about this piece, and I hope you have fun preparing it, and good luck at your auditions. If you need any help of any kind, if you want to learn more about the music department here at Washburn University, you can feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email is down below in the description, and I look forward to hearing from you. Good luck on your auditions. Play well.